Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Work Hat Hub. I'm Jake, and with me, as always, is the brilliant Emily. Today, we're diving into a topic that's close to home for many of us in the startup world.
That's right, Jake. We're talking about the startup founder's journey, balancing dreams and letting go. It's a roller coaster ride that many of us are familiar with, isn't it?
Oh, you bet. And let me tell you, it's not always the glamorous journey that social media makes it out to be. Speaking of which, Emily, have you scrolled through LinkedIn lately?
Don't even get me started. It's like every founder out there is living their best life 24/7. Nothing but wins and success stories.
Right? It's almost comical how good we've gotten at spinning our stories. I mean, one minute you're living in a box, and the next you're a CEO with a multi-million-dollar valuation. It's like startup magic.
Ha! Startup magic indeed. But you know what, Jake? I think it's time we pull back the curtain on this magic show. The reality is, behind all those shiny posts and funding announcements, there's a whole lot of, well, let's call it what it is, struggle.
Absolutely. It's like we're all part of this unspoken agreement to only show the highlight reel. But let's be real for a second. The startup world is more like a low-budget horror film than a blockbuster success story.
Oh my God, yes! One minute you're dreaming of being on the cover of Forbes, and the next you're drowning in spreadsheets wondering if you've made a terrible mistake.
Been there, done that. And you know what's crazy? We're all going through similar struggles, but we're so good at putting on this brave face that we end up feeling alone in our challenges.
It's true. We've perfected the art of the entrepreneurial poker face. But here's the thing. Stress is the silent partner in every startup. It's like that clingy, unwelcome guest that just won't leave.
Oh man, tell me about it. And it's not just the occasional stressful moment. We're talking about constant, grinding stress that can really take a toll on your mental and physical health.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting? There was this recent news about a founder who shared a pretty sobering cautionary tale about the dangers of unhealthy lifestyle choices linked to hustle culture.
Oh yeah, I saw that. It really got me thinking about how we, as founders, often operate in these two extreme modes, God complex and existential crisis. We're either soaring high on our vision or getting slapped down hard by reality.
It's like we're constantly walking this tightrope between our burning ambitions and our fragile sanity. And too often, we convince ourselves that to achieve our goals, we have to sacrifice our well-being.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Emily. It's like we've all bought into this idea that ambition and sanity are mutually exclusive. But you know what? I think that's a dangerous myth we need to debunk.
Absolutely. I mean, ambition without sanity is like...
Like a car without brakes?
Yes, exactly. It might get you to your destination quickly, but the journey could be disastrous. And isn't the journey supposed to be just as important as the destination?
You know, that reminds me of a quote often attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's not the destination, it's the journey. I think we founders could really benefit from taking that to heart.
Definitely. There's joy in learning to be taken from every moment of our lives, both inside and outside of work. But it's so easy to lose sight of that when we're caught up in the hustle.
You're so right. And you know what? I think it's high time we start talking about how to find that balance. How can we pursue our ambitious dreams without sacrificing our sanity in the process?
That's a great question, Jake, and I think it's the perfect segue into our next topic. We're going to dive into what I like to call the balance framework, a threefold approach to not losing your mind in the manic world of startups.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Can you give our listeners a little teaser of what this framework involves?
Sure thing. It's all about defining your range of tolerance, challenging toxic beliefs, and really asking yourself if the startup life is the right progression for you. But we'll get into all the juicy details in just a moment.
I can't wait to dig into that. It sounds like exactly what we need to hear in this age of hustle culture and startup glorification.
Absolutely. But before we do, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll unpack this balance framework and explore how founders can maintain their sanity while chasing their dreams.
Sounds great, Emily. Stay tuned, folks. You won't want to miss this. And we're back, listeners. Before the break, Emily teased us with her balance framework for maintaining sanity in the startup world. Emily, I'm dying to know more about this. Can you break it down for us?
Absolutely, Jake. Let's start with the first part of the framework, defining your range of tolerance. It's all about understanding your personal limits and recognizing when you're pushing yourself too far.
That makes sense. I mean, we're not polar bears trying to sunbathe in the Sahara, right? We all have our optimal environments where we thrive.
Exactly. And it's crucial to recognize the signs when we're pushing beyond that optimal zone. Things like disrupted sleep, strained relationships, or relying on that nightly bottle of wine to unwind.
Oh man, I've definitely been there. Those huge bags under the eyes, the constant tightness in the chest. It's like our bodies are screaming at us to slow down, but we just keep pushing.
Right? And here's the thing. These aren't just inconveniences. They're our body's way of saying, hey, something needs to change. It's about listening to those signals and actually doing something about them.
That's a great point. But it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, this is just part of being a founder. Everyone else is handling it better than me.
And that, Jake, leads us perfectly into the second part of our framework, challenging toxic beliefs. The startup world is full of these dangerous myths that we need to confront head-on.
Like the idea that constant stress is just the founder tax we have to pay, or that taking a break means we're not committed enough.
Exactly those kinds of beliefs. They're not just harmful. They can lead to some really negative behaviors like isolating ourselves or even self-harm in extreme cases.
Wow, when you put it that way, it really highlights how dangerous these beliefs can be. So how do we go about challenging them?
It starts with awareness, recognizing these toxic thoughts when they pop up. Then we need to actively question them. Is it really true that all successful founders are stressed 24/7? Or that taking care of our mental health means we're not dedicated enough?
I can see how that would be powerful. It's like giving ourselves permission to be human, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to the third part of our framework, asking ourselves if startup life is really the right progression for our lives.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, there's so much pressure to stick it out, to not be a quitter. How do you even begin to tackle that question?
It's not easy, that's for sure, but it's about being honest with ourselves. The startup life isn't for everyone, and that's okay. It's not an elite club, it's a lifestyle choice.
You're right. I think we often get caught up in the romantic vision of founding a startup without really scrutinizing if it aligns with our personal goals and well-being.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to fool ourselves into thinking a bad opportunity is a good one. We need to be willing to take a step back and really evaluate if this path is serving us.
That takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? To potentially walk away from something you've poured so much into.
It does, Jake. But you know what? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to choose a different path, to prioritize our well-being over the allure of startup glory.
I couldn't agree more. This balance framework really gives us a lot to think about. It's not just about surviving the startup journey, but about making sure it's a journey worth taking in the first place.
Absolutely, Jake. And you know what? This balance framework isn't just theoretical. It's inspired by insights from growth experts like Andy Johns, who've been through the startup ringer and come out the other side with some hard-earned wisdom.
Oh, Andy Johns. Wasn't he the growth legend behind Facebook, Twitter, and a bunch of other tech giants? I remember hearing he left his high-flying career a few years back.
That's right. He came dangerously close to a heart attack and decided it was time to prioritize his health. It's a stark reminder of what can happen when we push ourselves too far.
Wow, that's sobering. So tell me more about this range of tolerance concept. How can founders start to identify their own limits?
Well, Jake, it's kind of like finding your Goldilocks zone, Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. We all have an optimal environment where we can thrive without burning out.
I like that analogy, but how do we know when we're pushing beyond that just right zone?
Great question. Andy Johns puts it really well. He says to look at your core behaviors, things like diet, exercise, sleep, socialization. When these start getting disrupted, it's a red flag.
Oh man, I can relate to that. There have been times when I've been so focused on work that I've completely neglected my health and relationships.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling a bit tired or stressed. We're talking about consistent issues, always having trouble sleeping, constantly strained relationships, relying on alcohol to unwind every night.
Those shallow breaths, the tightness in your chest. I've definitely been there, but it's so easy to brush it off as just part of the startup grind. You know?
That's the trap, isn't it? We tell ourselves it's normal, that everyone's going through it. But Andy makes a great point. When these core functions are suffering, it's undeniable that something detrimental to your well-being is going on.
It's like our bodies are sending us a message, but we've gotten so good at ignoring it. How do we start listening?
I think it starts with awareness, really paying attention to how we're feeling, physically and mentally, and then crucially being honest with ourselves about what those feelings mean.
That makes sense, but I can already hear some founders out there saying, but I can't afford to slow down. We're in a crucial growth phase.
And that's where the real challenge comes in. It's about recognizing that taking care of yourself isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for long-term success. As Andy puts it, what's an empire worth if you're too burned out to enjoy it?
Oof, that hits home. So it's not about completely avoiding stress, right? It's more about managing it?
Exactly. Think of it like weight training for your brain. A little challenge here and there can make you mentally stronger. But just like with physical exercise, you need to build up gradually and know when to rest.
I love that analogy. It's not about enduring more and more until you snap, but about smartly extending your capacities over time.
Precisely. And remember, everyone's range of tolerance is different. What works for one founder might be too much for another. It's about finding your personal sweet spot.
This is all fantastic advice, Emily. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of this balance framework. What other insights can we glean from it?
Well, Jake, another crucial aspect of the balance framework is challenging those toxic beliefs we talked about earlier. It's not just about recognizing stress. It's about confronting the mindset that leads us there in the first place.
Right? Like the belief that we have to be working 24/7 to be successful, or that taking a break means we're not committed enough. How do we start dismantling these ideas?
It starts with awareness, really. We need to catch ourselves when these thoughts pop up. For example, if you find yourself thinking, I can't take a day off, my competitors are probably working right now, that's a red flag.
Oh man, I've definitely had that thought before. It's like we're in this imaginary race with people we've never even met.
Exactly. And once we recognize these thoughts, we need to challenge them. Ask yourself, is this really true? Is working myself to exhaustion actually going to make my startup more successful?
That's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, we're so conditioned to believe that more work equals more success. How do we start to shift that mindset?
It's not easy, but it helps to look at successful founders who prioritize balance. Take Arianna Huffington, for example. After collapsing from exhaustion, she became a huge advocate for sleep and well-being in the business world.
That's a great point. It's like we need to redefine what success looks like. Maybe it's not just about the bottom line, but about creating a sustainable, fulfilling life alongside our business.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the third part of our framework, really questioning if the startup life is the right path for us. It's a tough question, but an important one.
Wow, that's a big one. I mean, after pouring so much into a startup, how do you even begin to consider that it might not be the right path?
It's definitely not an easy question to face, but it's crucial to remember that the startup life isn't for everyone, and that's okay. It doesn't make you any less ambitious or visionary to choose a different path.
I can see how that would be a relief for some founders to hear. But how do you suggest people approach this question? It seems like it could be a pretty emotional decision.
You're right, it is emotional. I think it helps to step back and look at the bigger picture. Ask yourself, is this path allowing me to live in line with my values? Am I able to maintain my health, my relationships, and my sense of purpose?
Those are great questions to reflect on. It's like taking stock of your life as a whole, not just your business metrics.
Exactly. And remember, choosing to step away from a startup doesn't mean you've failed. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is recognize when something isn't working and make a change.
That's powerful, Emily. It's about redefining success on our own terms, isn't it? Not just chasing some predetermined idea of what a successful founder looks like.
You've got it, Jake. And you know what? This framework isn't just about avoiding burnout. It's about creating a sustainable, fulfilling entrepreneurial journey, one where success includes personal well-being, not just business metrics.
I love that perspective. It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be human, with all our needs and limitations, even as we pursue these big dreams.
Absolutely. And when we do that, we might find that we're not just building better businesses, but better lives overall. And isn't that the real measure of success?
You're absolutely right, Emily. This balance framework really gives us a new perspective on success in the startup world. But I can't help wondering, how do we actually put this into practice? It's one thing to understand it conceptually, but another to live it day to day.
That's a great question, Jake. Implementing this framework is definitely a process, not a one-time fix. I think a good place to start is by setting clear boundaries, both with ourselves and others.
Boundaries, huh? Like not checking emails after 8 p.m. kind of thing?
Exactly. But it goes beyond that. It's about creating a structure that supports your well-being. This could mean scheduling regular breaks throughout your day, setting aside time for exercise, or even blocking out thinking time where you're not actively working, but allowing your mind to wander and be creative.
I like that idea of thinking time. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind that we forget to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes those moments of doing nothing can lead to our biggest breakthroughs. It's about giving our brains the space to make connections and come up with innovative solutions.
That makes a lot of sense. But I can already hear some founders saying, but I don't have time for breaks. There's too much to do.
And that's where the mindset shift comes in. We need to start seeing these breaks not as a luxury, but as a necessary part of our work. They're what allow us to show up fully and do our best work in the long run.
Right, it's like recharging our batteries. We wouldn't expect our phones to run indefinitely without charging, so why do we expect that of ourselves?
Exactly, and just like with our phones, if we let our batteries run too low too often, it can cause long-term damage. That's where burnout comes from.
So true. But Emily, what about when things get really intense, like during a product launch or a crucial funding round? How do we maintain balance then?
That's when it becomes even more critical to stick to our boundaries and self-care routines. Yes, there might be times when we need to push a little harder, but it shouldn't become the norm. And even during those intense periods, we need to find ways to decompress and recharge.
I can see how that would be challenging. Any tips for managing those high-pressure situations?
Absolutely. One strategy is to build a support network, both within and outside of your business. This could be mentors, fellow founders, or even a therapist. Having people you can turn to for advice or just to vent can be incredibly valuable.
That's a great point. I think sometimes as founders we feel like we have to have all the answers, but having that support system can really lighten the load.
Definitely. And don't forget about the power of delegation. As founders, we often feel like we need to do everything ourselves, but learning to trust our team and delegate tasks can be a game changer.
Oh man, delegation. That's a tough one for a lot of founders, isn't it? It's like letting go of control.
It absolutely is, but it's also a crucial skill for scaling both your business and your personal capacity. When we try to do everything ourselves, we become the bottleneck in our own growth.
That's a powerful way to look at it. So, in essence, this balance framework is not just about avoiding burnout, but actually setting ourselves up for sustainable success.
Exactly, Jake. It's about creating a foundation that allows both us and our businesses to thrive in the long term. Remember, a burnt-out founder can't lead effectively, no matter how brilliant their idea is.